specifically about my own day to day, I mean, I wake up, for example, in the morning. I start with some training. I usually do them in the mornings because it's easier to just get it done. And then usually I start my day at 8 o'clock. And you can tell, for me, there's three priorities throughout that I focus on. One is to make sure that our players are fine. In our agency, the people that I mentioned, they also look after the players. So I have weekly meetings with them, and we look at every player. How have they performed? Is everything fine? Do we need to do anything? Things change quite quickly sometimes. And then I look at, for example, the players that we have in our own pipeline. So the players that we'd like to identify and work with. How can we get access to them, for example? We try to have meetings with players which we want to work with. Then it's also a case of clubs constantly having meetings with them at the right time to nurture the relationship, but also make connection with new clubs. So new clubs in new markets, clubs in our own market that we might not have had a chance to engage with. You don't want to just be sending emails and asking them, hey, what are you looking for next window? You want to make it a bit more personal, and the clubs appreciate that. So identifying clubs, nurturing relationships, and in the end, is all about, as an agency, as I said, we make a living by transferring players. So it's all about doing it the right way. So planning ahead, which players do we know needs to move next window? So start to already plan for that in the best way to create the best conditions around that. So this is how the day-to-day can look like. Another element that I want to add is that myself personally, I do a lot of scouting myself. So obviously now with the pandemic, it's been video scouting because we've not been allowed to attend things. So I spend hours during the week to look at players that are being sent to me, either from the boys in the agency or from other partners, or players that I'm interested in myself, basically. So sometimes I start at 8 and I finish 10, 11 in the evening. Sometimes I finish normal hours, and sometimes you spend weekends. But when you're passionate about it, you don't look at the time.
No, I mean, it's so crazy. I mean, recently Jorge Mendes got named sports agent of the century. It's such a crazy way to see how the game has evolved, but how that business and agency side has evolved. Huge. The way how agents are in the front now. They're taking care of a lot of businesses, and it didn't used to be like that. Probably from the beginning, it used to be the player used to negotiate his own deals, and as time evolved, now owners are having difficulty because now there's someone coming in and really taking care of the player, looking at what's in the best interest long term, not just short term, but long term. So I want to kind of get into that. How does someone get started? How did you get started? Because I know when you've set up something good, now you have a base in Sweden, in Iran, in the UK. So you have a good infrastructure set now, but it's not said like that at the beginning stages, the early stages, where it's so difficult from if you got to get registered, where is the test got to come from? How do you take that? And then how does the agency get set up from there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My own journey started 2012. I mean, I can share. I used to play football myself. I started when I was like 9 years old. So my background is that I'm from Iran. I was born in Iran, in Tehran, but when I was 2 years old, we moved with the family to Stockholm, Sweden. So I grew up in Stockholm, Sweden. And I always wanted to become a professional footballer, but I choose to say I was never good enough, even though I had a time where I really actually made a plan, because I was sort of 18, and I was playing in the non-leagues of Sweden, and I've made a plan of actually getting myself to the top, but I just never made it. I was injured or sick or just good enough. And why I mention I'm not good enough, because I realize now, from a mentality point of view, mindset point of view, I wasn't disciplined enough. I didn't have those ingredients, and we'll speak more about that as well, because I think that's a very important element when we speak about these things. So I therefore went into studying. I always wanted to work in the business, so I studied sports management in a town 2 hours away from Sweden called Örebro, and I did that for about 5 years. And during that time, my interest to become a sports agent or football agent, as they say, grew. And you can say that after my university studies, I tried to get into an agency because that was for me the best way to actually learn the game. So getting into an agency, see how it's done. So the things that you mentioned, because for me, I was only reading newspapers, and I see Mino Ryle on this side, Jonathan Barnett, Paul Mendes, all of these big guys. They're moving this player to that player, but there was so much I didn't know, which I know today. So there's a lot of young people gets in touch with me who wants to join, but I try to break that down to them, because being an agent is a very tough lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle that you need to be aware about. So I wanted to learn that, and I was fortunate 2012 to get in touch with an agency in Sweden who were quite established, had about 20, 25 players, and the agent there helped me a lot. I still know him really well. We're still good friends today, and that was sort of my way into learning the business, looking after the player, being a mentor for the players, dealing with parents, dealing with sort of the players' emotions, promote the players, market the players, the importance of that, the constant promotion and marketing, helping them, getting trials to the bigger stage in the Premier League or Championship, for example, being part of a trial to see what's happening actually, seeing the communication with the club. So all of those elements, you can perhaps say everything apart from the negotiation, which was made, by the agent, but he was kind enough to allow me see the communication of that as well, and sort of break it down to, okay, this is what's happening now. When they say this is what they mean. So very fruitful. And those 4 years that I did that was my way in. Now, how you start, that's one way to start, basically, where I advise that if you can, try to join an agency or an agent where you can do some of this work. Maybe you can offload them. Now, that is difficult because I know the agent market is it's a still very closed market. It's the information that is inside an agency. People are not so keen to share that, because what it is, these guys who've been working for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, they build it up themselves. The knowledge is something that they've learned on the streets, if you like. It's this, you don't find a university education around sports agents, for example, or football agents. So it's almost like you had to pick it up yourself. There's FIFA who put the regulations there. Back in the days, you made an exam, you got a book of like 500 pages, you study, and then you pay the fee, and you're a licensed agent. Nowadays, that's not the way it goes. Nowadays, depending on which country you are, there's a registration process. So in the UK, for example, you have to pay a fee every year, and then you can allow yourself to be called intermediary, because that's the word instead of agent. So football intermediary. If you want to work with youngsters in the UK, you need to do sort of like a background check and pass that one, and then you can work with players under 18. But if you, for example, you go to Italy, there's an exam. For example, if you go to France, there's an exam. If you go to other markets, for example, it might not be an exam. It might not be anything. You just have to sort of declare the transfer with the association once you've done it, for example. So those technicalities is good for anyone to know, like, okay, what's the regulations in my country, depending on whether it's football or whatever sports it is, to learn about them. But then it's all about trying to, get experience. And you can do it by joining an agency or networking by going to conferences. Nowadays, loads of workshops and courses, loads of them. I did, for example, a agent course in a university in London, which is the sort of first accredited one, and they do it now online as well. So that's a great way of just getting your foot into the door. I think it's a great way for them to try to interact try to basically find other people who might be on the same pathway, and that way it creates ideas. What I wanted to emphasize on is that when they're trying to get a foot into the door, what's important, which I see many people do, and I did it myself. Usually, you finish uni or you want to get into something, you get in touch and you ask, hey, can I join your agency? This is my CV. I worked here, here, and here, and that's great. That's how we all do it. But I think there's a shift that is happening now, where it's more about, okay, this is who you are, but what can you offer me? What use do I have of bringing you in? That might be difficult, but actually it's not that difficult. If you think about, okay, what am I good at? What can I do? What am I interested in? I'm, for example, very interested in football. I love going to games. And around me are these teams, for example. And around me are these people that I know. So bring that to the table and say, hey, look, I can do scouting for you. Or I can, put you in touch with these people, for example, because I know them. So you offer them some things. And you might not even be looking to get paid, because the experience is more worth than the money. And if you learn how to do things, then you learn how to also make money. So it's more about offering what can you actually offer the agency or the agent that you want to work with in the beginning. That way, at least for me, if someone would come approach me that way, immediately they will get my attention. And if I cannot do anything, I'll probably put them in touch with somebody that I know can.